just make sure that we got everything in frame here.
And
Neat.
again, I'm female, so I don't want my skirt here.
Okay. All right.
So we have the two of us in it?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we're both in there. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So Becky, if you just want to give us a little bit of background.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Great.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name is Becky Reno. I am a project and program manager currently consulting for the Bank of Oklahoma. And I've been doing this for many years, worked in many different industries, but specifically in project management, both in technology and in operations.
Perfect. All right. Thanks. Okay. So, I mean, going over just your LinkedIn profile, you've been a project manager for quite a while, and it looks like you even just started in project management. So how did you, what was your education before you got into the workforce, and how did you just get started right into project management, or did you do something before project management that kind of led into it?
Yeah, I did. So I actually started out, I was in school studying software development. And I knew in that I loved being around the technology, but actually doing it, what my mentor used to call locked in a room with a bag of Fritos, was not my vibe. So how do I find what I can do to be around this technology I love, but not locked in a room alone with it? How do we pull that all together? So I actually was recruited by a startup firm, and I just started at an entry-level position. I was the 7th employee. And eventually that just grew, and I just moved from position to position to position, starting new departments in their organization. And it was software fulfillment in the days when you had to ship software instead of downloading it. So there was a lot of production work and that sort of thing. And then moved into, just really didn't ever look back as far as I transitioned that experience from operations, truly all operations, into actual project management specific to technology. That was a software firm, and so then I took it into other firms doing software.
Okay, so when you're starting up a new division, were employees already there, or were you starting up from scratch? Did you ever have to hire employees?
Yeah, everything was from scratch.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so again, like I was 7th employee. When I left, there were 150 of us.
Oh wow.
Over a 4-year period. So that was the tech boom, right? It was going really well. And so, I had a great mentor there. I had an amazing mentor who knew where he wanted to take things, but gave us room to figure it out. And so when I left there, I was the VP of operations. So essentially, how did I create it? I could see what needed to happen because we basically started filling gaps. When you're brand new, it's like, okay, here's something that we're struggling with. Let's create something to serve that need. So, and I think that serves me well now in project management and coming from an analyst perspective. What do you need rather than just doing what you think you need? Let me hear your problem and let's collaborate for a solution. So we did that same thing, and so I just had to always have a proof of concept, then prove that it worked, whether it was folders, sticking papers in folders and moving them to the different departments saying, see, this makes it work. Now I created a business case for actually getting them to build software for us internally. What do they say? The cobbler's kids have no shoes, right? So we had no software of our own, but we were selling it like crazy to everybody else. So we built a business justification for actually getting that internally and making us move faster and better. And then we would hire. I would hire myself out of a job. That was my mantra. And at first that was really scary. So I would backfill that position, hire people, and then would not really have anything, right? And that's a scary place to be. But soon you identify the next need and you move to the next thing. So that was kind of my story. Thanks for letting me relive that.
So when you're doing project management things, have you ever been in a situation where one department or even one individual just didn't have the motivation to go along with what the overall project was?
The better question would be, have I ever had it where it wasn't that way? Yeah, there's always, and there's any number of reasons for that, but absolutely yes. To answer your question, do you want to
Yeah, so how do
You
you
gonna elaborate?
get around that? I mean, if you're not their direct manager, how do you motivate people to do what you tell them to do?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not their direct manager, telling them what to do is not very good.
Okay.
It's not very successful, at least for me. I call myself a relationship manager rather than a project manager. So, and an influencer is a really big term these days. Everyone's talking the word influencer. You know, I'm a YouTuber, I'm an influencer, right? But what does that mean in the workplace? And the first thing for me is building relationship. With regard to a project though, there is a thing that's put on the table. A project means it has a start and an end, usually a budget and a schedule to go along with that, right? And so people are brought together to participate in it, and you create those stakeholders and then immediately gain buy-in and relationship with those stakeholders, and you quickly learn who's in and who's not. And then what I do from a personal perspective is I dig underneath and look for the why. I see someone's resisting, why? And then I find out this project is going to eliminate a portion of their jobs in their organization. Yeah. I've done that a lot. That's very uncomfortable. So you immediately start looking at where do people go with this amazing experience that they already have into another place in the organization. Start working that from the beginning. Other times, people don't like it because it wasn't their idea. And so you're like, well, okay. They don't think it's a great idea, they don't think you should do it, and I'm going to make this as difficult as I can for you. You know, that happens.
Wow.
And if that's the case, then it's typical people, it's what's in it for me, right? So I look for what's in it for them, even if it wasn't their idea, find a win for them some way, and then bring them to the table with that.
Okay. Do you ever have issues with two different groups not being able to work together on a project?
Yeah, and that can come from a couple of different areas. Usually my projects are programs, and they're usually end to end from, say, like, for an example, order entry all the way to billing. So, and in our mortgage projects that we're doing, right, it's all the way from creating a loan or even an estimate on a loan, right, you know, just a pre-approval, all the way to funding it, right? We know that goes through at least 22 different interfaces, 4 different systems that it integrates with. So every one of those has a stakeholder involved. So people have different ideas about how it should work. And again, for the example of the project you and I are working on together, we need to eliminate customizations. Customizations were created because you wanted to do it one way, I wanted to do it another way, we couldn't agree, so they just said, okay, we're gonna customize it so it'll do what everybody wants. But that's not efficient financially, it's not efficient for maintaining the software. So yes, you have to, I mean, that's when you really put on your negotiation skills, you know, your negotiator hat. And again, find what's in it for you, and bring the people together and say, we need to find a win-win. How does this work for all of us? And then you find what's that motivator. Your budget or your bonus is based on saving money, or I look for those kind of things. Personal, what's in it for them? It's in it for you if you hit this date. Okay, great. So if you'll cooperate with me, you're more likely to get your bonus because we'll hit that date together. So you gotta find the motivator, right?
Nice, yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Great, all right. Have you ever, so are you on a team right now, or are you just kind of a single point of contact for the entire project?
So yes and yes. The bank has set up, which many organizations have, which is a project management organization. And that is made up of all project managers. And we report up through that project management structure. And the head of that project management organization reports to the head of IT.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a part of IT, but I'm a third leg in that stool. So there's the business, the side with which you participate and work, and that's usually our project sponsor. There's the technology team, IT, that's actually doing the work, the business analysts, the developers that are actually fulfilling the requirements from the business. Much like you have 2 hats yourself too. You do the reporting, you build out the reports, but you do the reports that the teams want. So you're kind of switching hats back and forth. And then there's that third person who is the project manager, who is bringing all those pieces together. Are you on schedule? Are you within scope? Are you on budget? what needs to be done, what are your roadblocks, because we're in Agile Scrum, right? We're also, what are your roadblocks, help remove those. So I am the single point of responsibility for the overall program, but I have the support of the PMO, and I have partnership with the other legs of that stool.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
So when you're bridging the gap from, a technical analyst to a project manager, can you give any advice for somebody who wants to make that jump into project management? How do they go about making that jump?
Sure. So from being a technologist to project management.
Yeah.
Well, you bring something to the table that's very unique that often project managers don't have, because the why behind things. If somebody, let's compare it to someone that's coming from the business. If someone comes from the business, they just know the what, but they don't know the how or the why it's taking so long, or the how I can make that happen. So having that depth of background also gives you something else, and that is the ability to speak that other language. Talking to technologists, they speak another language, right? Some speak English better than others, but to be able to be that interpreter, to be that bridge, that's really big. So how do you make that happen? Get yourself on a project and make yourself available. Raise your hand. How can I help? What can I do? Be there to support the project manager, the project analyst, the business analyst. Just put yourself in that place where you get that experience. Put it on your resume, right? And then once you have it on your resume, like an entry level would be called a project coordinator. So how can I help facilitate you? It may look like, you just asked me to order food, book conference rooms, but on a massive project, and you saw this when we did that, we did 3 solid weeks of 80 people. Well, the last day there were 50 people, and last week there were 50 people. Some weeks there were 20 or 30 people in a room, making sure that room is together, making sure that the technology is set up so that the screens work and the overheads work and the microphones work and the food is ordered. If somebody's doing that, you should not notice that person. If that's what happened, if you didn't notice that person, then it was seamless and they were doing their job.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And that's what it takes. You take that experience and you use it for anything else in managing a project. It's all the behind the scenes stuff. So don't be offended when you get asked to book conference rooms.
Nice. Okay. So you said earlier that your management style is more of an influencer. Would you say that's changed over time, or have you always been an influencer and it's just kind of matured to expert level?
It's changed over time because I feel like with the changes in technology, we used to start out where we were writing all of our own code, right? If you were going to have software within your organization, you had devs that were building it from scratch. So we all understood the term I use, stay in your lane. We understood what our role was. So I didn't have to influence very hard. This person knew they were this, they were that, they knew the timeline, they knew the schedule, they knew the cadence, they knew each other, they knew the ins and outs. And so I learned how it all worked, so that kind of set me up to be an influencer. I influenced more where it came from the stakeholders. I definitely was more of an influencer there because stakeholders are debating about the right way to do things, learning to let people be heard, learning when you're dealing with technologists that sometimes they just need to get something out of their head because they just spin like this, and if you don't let me say this, I'm not going to be able to move on to the next piece of the conversation. It took me a long time to figure that one out. Another one, sometimes people need to let you know how smart they are. I used to just think these people are obnoxious, and they're like, when I let that person be heard, they got to say, here's why I'm here, this is why I'm important. We heard them, great, and we go on with the conversation. But it's just people skills, right? But I will say now that either you're buying software as a service where you're actually not even developing at all, or you're installing something that is an off-the-shelf product that you're installing in your local environments, like what we're doing here at the bank on this project. And you have to, I use the terminology that it's like a giant box of Legos. It sounds like a great idea. They'll come in with their dog and pony show and tell you all the great cool things it can do, but you have to learn to be an expert eventually to create that and make it happen. So yeah, that becomes really, really difficult, because sometimes you don't get the instructions. They just tell you, this is supposed to be the Death Star. To me, it looks like a big mess, but eventually it becomes the Death Star. So I think I grew into that, seeing that experience, but I think it's more important now, because you now have vendors you're having to have buy-in with. How does a vendor have skin in the game for you to be successful if you're just taking their product? Once they make the sale, they're out the door. How do you build that relationship? How do you build that statement of work? How do you word it exactly right so that you can have that influence, that money thing I said about before? It's not bonus, but it's where you're gonna get, well, maybe it is a salesman's bonus if you do that. But there are many things that have nuances now that are quite different as things evolve. So I think that I actually got to do it at the right time, when there weren't so many unusual situations like there are now. In this project, we have 5 vendors, and all of our, and those systems all have to talk to each other. You know, and it's the classic thing, if your printer doesn't work, the printer guy says it's your computer